The common tongue. The bars of the cage rattled to the movement of the metal door. Cole woke with a stir. Eden was already sitting up. They were led back into the great hall, back through the stone forest. The pillars remained just as monolithic. Cole could see Eden had grown weaker. Cole had too. It had been a strenuous couple of days, with the fluency failings and the journey into the mountain, but it was more than that. Eden's skin was greasy with a cold sweat, his eyes dim, his posture hunched. None of the dwarves seemed particularly concerned with him, but Eden was definitely sick, playing host to evil. The troop approached another wall bearing many carved entries into its face. In the middle, a great arch rose more than double the height of any other. Gold etchings had been embedded into the rock around the edge. The huge double doors were flung open, and the bright light from within sighed through the stagnant air and cast a dagger beam across the floor. Everything else seemed in shadow. The party stepped out into the dim and into the light of the archway. The noiselessness from within was audible. The bustle of the great hall faded, and their footsteps became everything. Up and down and along the walls, hundreds of bronze dishes, silver plates, and golden mirrors had been hung. Fires on the floor, attached to the walls and hanging from the ceiling, produced light and warmth of the room, and the reflective metal enhanced them. Running down either side of the hall was a row of ironclad dwarves, armour polished, spears menacing, shields absolute, and cloaks bold. The bearded stoics stood in silence as the craters were taken deeper into the chamber. In the centre of the room, a thin staircase rose to the far wall. At its feet stood two more guards. At the summit, something gold sat shrouded in the lights cast by the surrounding jewels and metals. The dwarves halted, and Cole squinted up at the gleaming figure. The voice boomed from above. "Why are you here?" Cole didn't know what to say. He didn't feel that "because you brought us here" was the sort of thing they were after. "We were searching for food," blurted out Eden. This did not appease the voice. "You dare enter our realms to exploit our resources? You dare? After our holds were sacked, after we died by the millions, after you failed to answer our call, what were you hoping for? That we would all be dead?" "What? No, we didn't even." "How quickly you forget the resilience of the dwarves." The guards cracked their spears off the stone, making Cole flinch. "How did you come so deep into the mountains without our detection?" Cole and Eden shared a look. "We came from across the water." "Impossible. Khazad is not open for another 17 nights, and it is many leagues from here," the voice thundered. "How did you come here?" "We came from across the water, on the fluency we designed," pleaded Cole. "What?" snapped the voice. "The fluency. We made it so we could travel to other lands for food." "You admit you came here to exploit our lands at least, even if you still try to deceive me with how." "No, we did not mean to come here. We were just trying to get to the other side of the Jutta, just across the water next to us. We did not mean to come this far." "Enough! Enough of this water! I will hear no more talk of water. How did you come so far into our lands without being seen?" "We left our island of Crank. Our plan was to travel across to the nearby land and get more food, but we were swept out to sea and crashed into the mountains. Ask him." Cole pointed at the ginger dwarf. "Ask him what we had with us when we were kidnapped. Tell him what we were sleeping under when you took us." The dwarf raised a bushy eyebrow at Cole before he answered. "They were sleeping under 2 sections of wood. It looked broken, as though it had once been one piece." "That was the fluency. It smashed in two when we crashed into the rocks." There was a thunderous stomp. "No more. I will hear no more of this." There was a shimmer at the summit of the stairs. A dull thud followed by another. He descended the stairs, bearing down on them. With every step the dwarf slowly materialized as his aura dispersed. He wore golden armour, linked like the ginger dwarfs. His 5-pronged beard hung below his bushy face. His matte black hair swayed down his back freely, On his head he bore a jewel-encrusted crown. His thumbs hooked into his belt, he halted, still above them, and judged them critically. "Now, tell me truth. Who are you and where did you come from?" "You first," dared Eden, who was very lucky this particular dwarf was very fond of his title. "We are the dwarves of Othzorak," he began, and held up his arms to the walls around him. "This is Othzorak, the last of the dwarven strongholds," he continued even louder, "and I am Fimber, the Everlord." His arms lowered and his eyes darkened. "Now, who are you?" "We are the creators. We come from the kingdom of Crank." "Kingdom? Who is your king?" "Codrich." "I know not this name. Codrich, son of who?" "What? I don't know that," said Eden. Fimber rounded on Cole, who shook his head to show he didn't know either. "Is that important?" "Peasants," Fimber sighed. "Where is Crank?" "Well, it's sort of over there," said Eden, waving a hand. "Or over there," he said, waving the other. "I don't know. I'm a little disorientated after the tunnels. Across the water at any rate." "I said no more water!" Fimber grew fierce again. "You and your fluency. No more lies." "They did have a wooden structure with them when they were discovered," said the ginger dwarf. "I do not believe you have been sucked into this fairy tale, Fenric. Have your wits deserted you?" Fimber did not wait for an answer. "What is it you create?" "All sorts," said Eden. "Most recently the fluency. Very handy for getting across." Cole smacked his hand across his partner's mouth. "I have heard enough from you two," declared Fimber. "Return them to their cell. No contact, no food, no water, no light. Give them a triple shift. See if that loosens their lips." "There may be some truth to their story." "Hold your tongue, Fenric. You don't have a mountain. I do. Learn your place in it." "Yes, my lord." "Better. Now take them back to the dungeon." Cole and Eden were grabbed at the elbows and pulled back towards the arch. The Everlord watched them leave with a grimace. The dwarves led them back through the pillars, back to their prison. Fenric grumbled something to one of his household. The recipient grumbled back, but Fenric repeated himself, and the dwarf scuttled off. As they walked through the columns, Cole decided to strike up a conversation. "Fenric, is it?" "Yes." "How come you speak Crankish?" Fenric's voice grew gruffer. "Speak what?" "Crankish. The language of Crank." "I know nothing of Crankish. I have never known it by this name. To me it is known as the common tongue." Cole did not understand that, but he had more pressing problems. "Why didn't you say you could understand us? Why didn't you talk to us?" "Those are not my orders. We are to remain silent as to gain knowledge of your character and intent." "The Everlord's orders are for you to capture any person in your borders, scare them half to death by not talking to them, and force them to climb great big bloody mountains, giving them no idea what is happening or what they have done wrong. Some ruler you got there." "He is only my ruler while I remain in these walls." "Well, he doesn't seem like the nicest chap. I would leave if I were you, preferably taking us with you." Fenric smiled under his facial hair. "Your optimism is impressive. Many would have broken in your shoes. I would leave if I could." They returned to the prison, and the creators were returned to their cells. They reached the prison, and the creators were returned to their cell. Before the door was closed, the dwarf who had been sent away returned. He was carrying a bucket of water and 2 tankards. At Fenric's request, he put them down in the cell. Behind him, several dwarves were in the process of lowering the fire. Fenric turned to them and grunted something, and they left it as it was. Cole gave Fenric a respectful nod as their cell door was closed and locked. The dwarves moved back into the great hall and sealed the prison behind them. Time passed slowly for the creators. They talked for a while, discussing their current predicament, but soon they both grew weary of the topic and silence fell. Eden tended to his foot, Every now and then he would take a break to fumble with his trouser pocket. Cole lay on his back, throwing a pebble into the air and catching it. He thought about nothing in particular. After a time, Cole had no idea how much. It could have been days, it could have been hours. The fire diminished. No one came to feed it, and it sputtered its last breath and died. Not long after, they exhausted their water supply, mostly through thirst, but spillages did occur in the dark. Eventually, the door did open, and both creators cowered at the back and shielded their eyes. Gradually, they moved their hands away from their eyes. There has been a hearing to decide your fate. It was not Fenric, and the dwarves were not of his house. Lord Fimber has ruled that you will not be granted leave from Othazorak. The creator's hopes sunk. However, he has decreed that he does not wish to expend valuable resources tending to your lives with impunity. You will therefore be put to work around the stronghold. If either of you attempt to escape or harm any dwarves during your work, you will be dealt Lord Fimber's swift justice. I trust you both understand what that means. He eyed them expectantly. They both nodded. Good. He gestured a hand to one of his companions to open the cell. You start today. But first, I imagine you are both in need of food and refreshment. Yes, said Eden. He looked as though he was well due of some nutrition, and stepped out of the cell. Through the great hall, other groups of dwarves bustled around them, going about their daily business. As they approached the other side, Cole could see that only one arch did not have its doors shut. It was the biggest, bigger even than Fimber's mighty hall. Out of it light spilled, and noise burst, the unmistakable racket of merriment. They entered to find hundreds of dwarves shouting, laughing, and gorging their considerable bellies on grub and grog. The dwarves led the creators down the long hall, between two massive dining tables. They told Eden and Cole to take a seat. Two of the dwarves sat with them, while the rest continued down the table to the food. Little conversation occurred. The two dwarves did not see the need to humour the creators, who were too occupied with the rich aromas to pay any attention anyway. The dwarves returned with platefuls for all. Eden and Cole eyed the concoction of meats and stews on their plates. It looked delicious, but they searched for cutlery and found none. They looked up and down the table and discovered that not one of the dwarves was using any. They simply dug in with their hands and shoveled the food into their mouths and beards. Eden followed their example by grabbing a chunk of meat and ripped off a piece with his teeth. Cole raised an eyebrow at the grizzled dwarf who sat next to him. He smiled in return and nodded to Cole's plate. Cole didn't need telling twice, and he tucked in. Codrich would like it here, said Eden. Yes, he would. What's that? Asked the dwarf next to Cole. I was just saying that Codrich, our king, would like it here. He's a big fan of meat, and plenty of it. The dwarf chuckled. Sounds like he might fit in, yes. Is he hardy? Hardiest man I know. Strongest too. And he has a beard, although not quite as big as any of the beards I've seen here. Well, I'd be surprised if it was longer than ours. They are never shaved or cut, you see. We take great pride in their upkeep and length. It takes 10 years for them to grow this much. He held up his thumb and forefinger an inch apart. They are used as an indicator of age, so younger dwarves can respect their elders, or longbeards, as we call ourselves. Our beards continue to grow until they lick the earth between our feet. When that happens, it is the first sign for us to settle. The dwarf observed their empty plates. Come, I must take you to work. The creators were led from the feasting hall. They continued down the same wall of the great hall and past many doors of different shapes and sizes. All were silent. As they went, Cole couldn't help inspecting beard lengths. If what the dwarf had said was true, he observed that none of them could be younger than 200 years. He looked to the grizzled dwarf who had spoken to him at the feast. His beard had begun to trail between his feet. He must have been close to 1,000. The dwarves halted. Two opened a colossal set of doors. Heat burst out and flushed over the creators. Here we go, began the Longbeard. The armor forge. This is where our master smiths construct our armour. Through their secrets, they can control metal and coax far more strength from it than any forger among men. You will assist the smiths in their tasks and do as they command. And in time, you may even be given license to design your own armour. Being a creator, this may offer you some relief. He fell silent to show he was done, and the creator stepped forward towards the forge. Not you, he said, resting a hand upon Cole's chest. Lord Fimber wants as little contact between you two as possible. He feels it would lead to conspiring and treachery against his goodwill. You will work separately. On your way, Eden. Eden was led into the steaming room, and the doors closed behind him as he glanced over his shoulder. Cole and the dwarves continued further down the wall and reached another door. Where are we? The weapons forge, said the dwarf as two of his companions opened the stone doors. Again a blaze of heat flooded from the chamber. Your instructions are the same as Eden's, only you will assist in weapons manufacture instead of armour. Good luck, Cole. I will be back to collect you at the end of your day. As he was funneled into the forge, Cole turned over his shoulder. What's your name, sir? They call me Grungy. I shall see you later, Grungy. The doors closed behind Cole, and he felt the full radiance of the forge. It was not just the heat that dominated the air. Anvils sang through the chamber as the smiths worked the metal to their will. Cole was brought to one of the smiths working towards the back of the chamber. He was the first bald dwarf Cole had seen. He still had a beard, but Cole could not judge his age because it was tucked into his thick leather apron. His great bare arms rippled as he worked the metal. He stopped at their approach, took off his rough leathers, and wiped his brow. The smith waved his hands, and Cole's escorts retreated. He looked the creator up and down. You're a big lad. The dwarf walked up to Cole, still studying him. Yes, strong too, I bet. He squeezed Cole's arm. Soft, though. He turned back to his forge. No matter. Stick with me, lad, and I'll have you carved out of wood. Stick with me long enough, and I'll have you chiselled from stone. What's your name? Cole. My name's Bolver. Come along, Cole. I'll show you what we do here. Cole followed Bolver into a side door. The smith led him through racks of spears, stacks of axes, shelves of warhammers. As they passed through the weapons, Bolver provided a running commentary. Axes, standard weapon for a warrior. I know you men like your swords, but dwarves prefer something a bit sturdier. Then there is the choice of double or single-handed. Double delivers a stronger blow, but can slow a warrior down or lose the protection of the shield which often accompanies an axe. Spears, good reach, also usually accompanied by a shield. Used a lot for regiments or tunnel fighting. Hammers, similar style to axes, just a preference thing. They approached the back wall. On it hung some more decorative and better quality combat weapons, as well as the most complex weapon in the dwarf smith's repertoire. What is that? Said Cole as he eyed one up. Bolver took one from off the wall. This is a crossbow. The dwarves' answer to ranged warfare. It lacks the reach of a longbow, but our engineering gives it more punch over a shorter distance. Our hunters use them on their quests for food. How does it work? Bolver used the lever at the side to crank the bow to full tension. He then grabbed a quarrel out of a nearby quiver and loaded it into the crossbow. He took aim at a target in the corner and fired. It thudded into the dummy, sending a puff of dust fluttering into the air. Impressive. Yes, it is, said Bolver as he hung it back on the wall. Now, what would you like to make? Not one of these, obviously. Too complex. I thought I was supposed to make whatever you told me to. Never mind all that hoity-toity. A smith makes his best work when he's constructing something he wants, stated Bolver. Allowing you to choose for yourself will give me a better idea of your ability and usefulness straight away, he said. No pressure then, Bolver chuckled. None. Now, what will it be? Two-handed axe. It's a classic, said Bolver as he started to lead Cole back out of the room. What's that? Asked Cole, pointing to a spear-like weapon in the corner, but longer and different in other respects too. That's a lance. What's it for? Cole inquired. Fighting, suggested Bulver. What kind of fighting? It looks overly cumbersome, pointed out Cole. Bulver said, It's for when a dwarf is mounted. Mounted? Yes, you know, when you're riding something. Dwarves ride things? Not mostly. None from Othorak. I made it as a special favour for Fenric, conceded Bulver. What does he ride? Asked Cole. Come on, said Bulver. He led Cole back into the forge, and then they entered another side room. We have pre-made shafts of various lengths. Different warriors prefer different lengths. This one, said Cole, as he picked up the longest. No. That length is for spears. Too long for an axe. Even for you. These are the longest that a double axe would have, finished Bulver, pointing to a shorter metal pole. What did you say about smiths and how they produce their best work when they're forging something they wanted to? Fine, use that. Double-headed as well? No, just single. Bulver picked up a block of metal and carried it over to Cole, one-handed. Take this. Cole wedged the pole into the crook of his arm, took the metal in both hands, and struggled back to Bulver's forge. You must be stronger, said Bulver. They melted the metal block down, and by the end of their day, Cole, with Bulver's guidance and assistance, had worked the metal into the rough shape of an axe head. The creators were treated to another feast, and both gorged themselves. Afterwards, Grungy escorted Cole and Eden back across the great hall. Neither spoke. The dwarves opened the door to the prison. Cole stepped forward, but was halted by dwarves as others pushed Eden back into their cell and locked it. I'm sorry, said Grungy. Fimba's orders. You are to be confined to separate jails. Cole and Eden shared a panicked look, but neither had any strength to confront the dwarves. Cole was led to the next door and given a new cell. He slumped against the bars and looked at Grungy. Get some rest. You'll need it for your next day.